Hi, everyone. I am we literally just met in person about an hour ago. So this is going to be really, really fun. She is the founder of Thrive by Design. She's a registered licensed clinical addiction specialist, and she's really advocating for art therapy in the Charlotte area. So I'm really excited to talk inside the advocacy that she is setting out to do. She's a longtime lover of art and an art educator. And so thank you so much for being here. And can you really guide us through your journey in starting in the art therapy field?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me, Candace. And it was amazing meeting you in person this morning. We got together with a big creative group here in Charlotte. So that was a great start to the day. And yes, so I have been here in the lovely city of Charlotte, North Carolina for a long, long time. I'm hitting 2 decades here, and I started as an art educator. And when I delved into our local school system as an art educator, I started noticing a lot of things. I started noticing that there were gaps, and I also noticed that in the art education room, it could be a really powerful space. It's naturally a space where students get to show their individuality, their uniqueness, which I love to promote and talk about because there's so many areas in life that we as adults or kids in school may be made to feel like they just need to fit in and they just need to kind of conform. And there's stress and shame around being unique individuals. So I started to see things like that. And I was already really curious about art therapy because art has always been, or creativity has really always been a catalyst for growth, for healing, for change in my own life. And so I that naturally led me to realize that if I was going to do the work that I felt like was my purpose and that could really, really help, because I was looking
Mhm.
around and seeing a lot of care gaps, and I just thought, like, we need more. We need more just here in Charlotte, here in North Carolina, but just in general. So that led me to get my credentials as an art therapist, study art therapy and counseling, and then along the way to realize that, this is powerful for all communities, but especially in addiction recovery. So with that, I began the journey of becoming, which I'm still on. I'm a registered licensed clinical addiction specialist. And so I work weekly now with addiction or substance abuse use disorder groups. And that community is already tapped into creativity, so it's amazing. I'm sure I'll talk more about that later, but that was kind of my journey of realizing, look, we have all these powerful things that can happen in the art room, but art educators are not art therapists, and counselors are not art
Mhm.
therapists. And so we need more,
Right.
especially because little kids are already tapped into that creativity. They know how to use it, you know?
Yeah.
We're just the ones holding them back if we don't let them use it. So, yeah, that was kind of
Mhm.
my journey to becoming an art therapist, opening my company, Thrive by Design, where it really is it's helped me to design a life I love, and it's here to promote and help others really get creative and design a life they love, take back control.
Yeah. Well, and you're really big in advocacy for so many things. Mental health being one, addiction being another. And do you want to road? I mean, feel free to share whatever you're comfortable to share. But I know that you are really empowering people to see beyond the experience that they're living in and see beyond their even what they're dealing with in hardship, especially in recovery, where a lot of and so it's really beautiful that you're helping them open to see themselves. Do you want to guide us through that journey?
Yeah, so obviously, I think if we're going to help anybody or promote anything, we need to be passionate about it. And so, as you know, I've had my personal story with grief, with addiction, having it rock my world, my family's world. And I walk around and hear stories of so many other people, and that's the same way. But we live in a society that's
Mhm.
really fast paced. It doesn't necessarily honor getting, noticing, pausing, sitting with our grief, with our troubles, with our worries, and acknowledging them and really trying to move through them. And so there's so much need for that. And so, as an art educator, I saw really that kids were having a hard time regulating their emotions. And that was coming out in the art. And I like to say that art can be a container and it can also be a meaning maker. So, I don't know how many times in the, just to go back to like the art classroom, I used to do these things while I was in art therapy school, but still as an art educator. And I started to learn how powerful it could be. I'd have students that, had a hard time sitting still. They might,
Mhm.
have different reasons for that, and that's totally fine. Other ones that really needed to uh, be able to draw or doodle while they're working. And so I'd have these prompts because I realized a lot of them had not been asked, how are they feeling today? How are you doing today? So as they would come in, I would have papers, and one of them would say, like, I feel blank today. And I would challenge them to limit their words. So they might say, use one or two words. And then the next challenge would be to draw how that feels. So I found it
Mhm.
amazing and powerful and a testimony to uniqueness because I could go to a table. Maybe I had 30 students and five of them said they were feeling happy today. And maybe six of them said they were feeling like sad or bummed in some way. They could use
Mhm.
the same words, but what I never saw is the same visual for those words. So if I
Hmm.
saw five students write happy on their paper, their visuals look completely different. And so again, it really just reaffirmed
Right.
like the idea that how that feels to us in our body is so unique, and we can only use words to a certain point. I think words are beautiful, they're wonderful, they're great ways to communicate, but they fall short sometimes.
Yeah.
And so the idea of, yeah, expressing beyond the words is really so important. Yeah. So
Mm.
that was just like in my educational piece.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying I love that. Sorry about that. I think that we don't realize what you just said was that we carry the different within our body, and some, like you've noticed, people don't always have the way in which, but sometimes when words aren't coming through, creative expression at least gets the energy to move and gets pay attention and be almost like one with it. What are some of the things that you've seen in your practice? And you're going to talk about some of the work you're doing, but what have you seen be the most powerful use of art in these class experiences?
Mm. Yeah. So in the class experiences, I think just the idea of um, the use of art, because in the class experiences, I was using it as an art educator. So I wasn't delving into art therapy, which is very different and a point to make later on. But the one of the most powerful things that I see is just the ability to teach students that their uniqueness is important and to hold on to that and to learn to use that as a superpower. I worked
Mm.
with so many students that were left-handed and thought that was weird. And then they were making art highlighting their left-handedness and talking about people they had researched that were left-handed and how cool it was. So like the idea that their differences, they came in that and they thought it was something to kind of hide or it was okay. And then by the time they left, it was like something to be celebrated. And so that's really, I get excited about that. I get excited about any work that I do with visuals, whether it's in education or art therapy, because I'll never walk around and see the same visual. And it just really, again, highlights how unique we are. And
Mhm.
then the other is it is emotional container. In the art classroom I had this wonderful students that would come in and look, they we have buses in Charlotte, and these buses can be kind of a heightened sense of reality when you're on them. They can be intense. There can be a lot of things happening before they get to school. Some students can come to school and they've already had an entire day. Maybe they didn't get sleep. Maybe they didn't get their physical needs
Mhm.
met. And then they're coming in school and they don't have the tools they need to do the day. And so maybe they're angry. Maybe they're sad. Maybe they want to cry, but that's not acceptable. Um, I have so many stories of using the arts to let them, express their emotions in different ways. Like I had one fifth grade student who would come in and really just believed art in general is taboo and was always angry. And we came up with this deal that, he could come in, he could see, he could have some choices. It's also a great place for choices. And if he started feeling angry, he could go over to this space that was a special space where he could start to tear paper. And he could just tear, because we know
Mhm.
that the idea of tearing is dispersing energy, releasing some things. It feels like taboo, but yet it's great. And then
Mhm.
we would get to the point he knew he had to clean up after, but he could go to that space and he could tear and he could rip up and he could kind of feel like he was getting some of the anger out. And then we got to a point where I would invite him and others that were using that space to then not just clean up, but use those torn pieces to make something else. And in art therapy, we call that yeah, it's really fun. I think one time they've made all kinds of creative things, but I think one time they even turned part of it into like a basketball with duct tape, because I also use duct tape and let them tear it and disperse energy. And they got a game going with it. And so it becomes a way to also teach them that when things happen and when they get angry, there's other ways to cope, that they don't need to do things that will get them negative consequences in school. But yet, as a school system, where do we allow them to have these emotions that are necessary without really getting into like maladaptive behavior? So
Mm.
yeah, there's so many stories like that in the art classroom. I do have to say too, one other thing that really just showed me that I needed to continue on the art therapy journey already as an art educator. I was in the classroom and we talk about grief too. I know it was talked about this morning in the talk, and I love to talk about grief because it can be taboo and there's so many forms of it. And when I worked in the school system as an art educator, I saw students drawing about grief and loss all the time on their papers. And there was this one child in particular, he would come into the art classroom, I think it was about third grade. He wouldn't want to interact with the students. He really couldn't focus to do the class assignment. And I would talk to him, and we came up with this agreement again that if he wanted to go sit in another space and draw, he could, and he could take any one of the papers I had set out with different props. And I think one day he took the paper that said "I wish blank," and he knew he could use a couple words because he was already used to this. And it was said, "I wish I was with my grandfather." And then he drew this whole scene, and the rest of the class left, and I went over and he showed me everything in the drawing, like what was going on with his grandfather. And then he finally mentioned that his grandfather had passed away. And
Mm.
first of all, I felt very honored that he would share that with me, that he felt
Yeah.
comfortable. And then I went to tell his teacher, and this is something that happens a lot of times that also, again, we need to advocate for. when I mentioned it to his teacher's response was, I don't know why he's still thinking about that because it was a year ago. And I was in
Oh,
I know,
wow.
and this is just why we all need to get curious about things that we don't know about because, in therapy we talk about postponed grief a lot of times. And with children, this is what I was seeing in the art classroom. Um, they usually postpone their grief subconsciously because they want to make sure that those around them who are caring for them are okay first. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Yep.
so again, we have all this going on in the school system, but we just are not trained. Like art
Mm.
educators aren't art therapists, teachers aren't trained, and they have, a lot of other things going on. We just need more help. We need to fill those care gaps. So those were some things that really stood out to me.
Yeah. As a society, that we don't necessarily understand how to support others in grief. I think when we even think back this week about how, back in the day, we used to wear all black for like year or two, however long, because it signaled to others that we were struggling and that we were grieving. And self, they had a way to understand that, at least in the beginning. But just hearing that, there's so much wish we could do, like as far as supporting the educators, supporting the students, and even the parents, because we're going through so much hardship right now. And I just am, wow, what if schools got to a point where they started the day a creative zone kids, whether it's meditation or even drawing, to allow them to
Mhm.
process before they even start, like how much could shift in a day, and even the teachers could be along with it. So anyways, what exactly is therapy for those that aren't
Mhm.
familiar? And on to top onto that is, what are you looking to see shift therapists or the art therapy industry? So two questions, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So tackle like what is art therapy? That's a great question. I love that question. So art therapy is done by therapists who are trained to use the arts as a mode for healing. And so the things I like to say that are
Mhm.
very unique about art therapy is that we get creative, whether it's with like two-dimensional things, whether we're drawing, whether we're using clay, whatever it is, there's a purpose behind it. And so the purpose is to tap into our subconscious. So a lot of
Mm.
times in society with verbal talk therapy, we're using one part of our brain, and with art therapy, we try to use, like, we go to that other part of the brain. Now, why? Why? First of all, there's a lot of research that the subconscious, the creative side of the brain is actually more truthful because we've learned that our logical side of the brain, our verbal, or when we're thinking cognitively, we can be so smart that we can trick ourselves into believing a reality that doesn't necessarily exist or is not the best for us, or believing that we are maybe okay, right? And
Mhm.
so when we work with art, it's like tapping into that dream state, that really bypassing our thinking sometimes, depending on how we use it, and really getting to what we've been holding in our body and in just in within ourselves, right? And so with art therapy, we also have what's called the expressive therapies continuum, which is really, really cool. In regular talk therapy, they have terms that are called top down or bottom up, which means top down is working like cognitively, and then down working into the body. Bottom up is from the body to cognitive, right? And so with art therapy, we actually do that with supplies, the
Mhm.
materials that we choose, and the way that we work. We can
Mhm.
do that as well. We're just using the modality of the creative arts to do that. And so there's a lot of similarities, but yet also it's not in place of talk therapy unless, there is someone that cannot actually access their words, but it's to go kind of hand in hand to really bridge the brain, both sides of the brain, because when trauma happens, we have, parts of our brains that are not firing. We need to change those neural pathways, and the way to do that a lot of times is through creativity. So the other thing though is it's really just about the
Right.
process. A lot of people come into art therapy groups. I work with a lot of adults right now, and they'll give this disclaimer. They'll say, and I love to hear it because they know my response now. They'll be like, I'm not an artist. I'm not creative. And then my response will be, uh, you're very creative, and I'm just glad that your perspective's going to shift in here, and wonderful welcome, because there's so many people that have been conditioned to their product is going to be judged, right? That it's a destination, not a journey, that it's, all
Mm,
these things. And so a lot of times when people hear art therapy, all of a sudden their body gets tight and they shut down. And a lot of that can link to the even back maybe middle school. If I'm generalizing, that's a time where even as art educators, we see that people start looking around, they start to hear things, they start to notice things, and really just if they don't feel like they have the skill to produce a product that's going to get acclaim, then they are like, you know what, I'm not that at all. And it's not, again, they're shutting it out from their identities. So, as an art therapist, I'm here to say we're all creative, we're born creative, and it's about tapping back into that and supporting your verbal therapy if you're doing that. And also to have other ways to reach different cultures because, in talk therapy and also in schools, there's so many gaps with reaching different cultures. Whereas art is a universal
right.
language, we can reach so many. So that's a little bit about art therapy, which I'm so passionate
No,
about. And then mhm,
yeah, yeah.
yes,
Go ahead, keep going. It
and then
it
no, I was
was
gonna say,
funny.
were you asking me about licensure, I think, or
I was going to say, yeah,
yeah, sorry, there's a little gap, but we'll get through it. I think that the universe and the technology knows we're talking about care gaps, and so it's just giving us, like, a gap to see how we work with it. Yeah. Well, so
exactly.
uh-huh. So licensure, you've heard me talk about this so many times. But many states have licensure for art therapists. North Carolina does not. And so that is a big thing because we want to be available to everybody. So without licensure, there's no insurance billing. We have limited jobs. Therapists are leaving the state. One of my good friends that I went to school with, she left to go to another state, not necessarily just because of that, but also because there were like more jobs and more availability. Um, that's also probably why we're not in the school system when other states have us in art therapists in the school systems. So there's that. It really is also unfortunate because I think without the licensure, there's a big gap in knowledge of what art therapists do. So I've worked in mental health facilities too. I've worked with, licensed mental health uh, counselors that do work like DBT, CBT. Also, I've worked with music therapists, rec therapists, other art therapists. But what I've noticed is there is a divide also in the mental health world between those that do verbal therapy and those with different modalities, a kind of a lack of understanding of what, say, maybe even art therapists do. So
Right.
even if there were available jobs, there's not understanding of even the training that we go through. We can be in spaces. This happens all the time if you talk to North Carolina, Charlotte art therapists, but we can be in spaces and people assume we're very much like art teachers, when
Mm,
really we are trained as therapists formally. We do
mm.
talk therapy, but we also are specialized in using the arts to work even in a different way with clients. So that's all. I think that and just so much more, just the awareness of art therapy hopefully will change when we get licensure.
Yeah. Well, and what do you think we can do as a community for anybody that's listening? How can we advocate for change? What are some of the things that you're working on in that area? And how do we even just petition for some of this to be in the schools or to be supportive for even the staff? What have you seen there?
Yes. So there's so many things we can do. I think there's an overwhelming sense of this is a lot, big picture. Like, how could we ever get this in our state and in North Carolina? And it really is about small little steps. It's about spreading the word. It's about like you inviting me on here to talk about this, spreading the awareness one conversation at a time. Um, where there is the American Art Therapy Association, their website has a lot of information. They have conferences. I think it's also starting with every single person either watching this or when every person out there that just has this idea that they are something separate from creativity. They are apart from it. They've parted ways, way back in the day. So I think it's like tapping into, what, there is time for creativity. It's been given a kind of a bad rap as frivolous, right? I think that happens in the schools with art educators too, and music and all the things, is that we need to understand that we're all unique in the ways that we learn and process are different. And so why are we taking one path mainly for learning? Why are we taking one path mainly for mental health? Um, I did amazing internship with my supervisor, Andrea Skidmore, at Anuvia Prevention and Recovery Center. And she inspired me so much because they were writing grants for different things. And she was the first one to say, like, I really support different modalities because what works for one doesn't work for another. And
Right.
if we can give them options, then we can help more people. And
Mhm.
especially in addiction recovery, and then when there's shame, when it's not safe to speak
Right.
certain things. I've worked with veterans who not only could some not access their words because of the traumatic event, but even those that could access their words, how are they going to speak in a group with other non-veterans, the atrocities that they went through?
Mhm.
Um, like, what is that gonna look like? How are people gonna hear it? How is it gonna sound coming out of their mouths, Like, versus drawing it, tearing it, putting it in the kiln to destroy it, to make something else out of it. They've been holding a lot in their bodies. And so I just think getting really curious about, like, how can we get creative with accepting other ways, for people to teach, for people to address mental health. And I'm here to say, like, art therapy is a great one. Like, invite us into your spaces. Like,
Yeah.
get curious, ask questions, start talking about it to other people. That would be amazing. And really just kind of look around now and see, like, we live in a very visual society. We're taking in all these visuals constantly, but and we're processing them in some way. If we're not in control of that, if we're not seeing actively what we're taking in, we're just taking it in. We're not letting anything out if we're not getting our creativity back out there. So those are some ways. I'm sure there's a lot of creative other ways that would be
Yeah.
open to listening to.
Yeah. No, I think you've done phenomenal at helping people almost like paint the picture. Huh, a little funny there. Um,
Yeah.
but And there's a couple of people I've just thought of that I would really like to connect you with. And, the thing about bringing people like you on is to give that other opportunity for people to see different modalities of healing and how they can really reclaim their life in many ways. Because when we hold on to emotion, we know that that causes disease, like physical illness, mental illness. It causes separation in our society. We see these events on the news. And so, if we can one person at a time truly change the world in all of these different ways, like there's so many different ways that we can help support ourselves, which then supports our community. So just to kind of close up a couple of things, what's the one thing you hope people take, away with them today? And then what's the best way for them to connect with you? And is there anything that you're working on that you want to share about?
Yeah. I think some of the big things are just to remember that healing is a process, not a product.
Mm.
And you don't need to be an artist to benefit from art therapy. We welcome all. Um, Creativity reconnects us to hope, to humanity, to possibility, to meaning. As you mentioned, like if we hold things in our body, we can experience physical illness. So it's also a way just to get that out of our body. Let it be that container for us. Um, some other things are, you know, um, it's not just about art on a page. It's really about what that experience looks like to you.
Mm.
And again, when words fall short, creativity speaks. It speaks really loudly.
Mhm.
It can help us understand and know each other better too.
Mm.
And the acronym HOPE, I heard in a group recently, it stands for hearing other people's experiences. And yeah, I think also hearing, but when we're in art therapy groups, we create together. It's so personal, it's so vulnerable, it's so unique. And then, yes, we also use words too, if the words are there. And then we hear those experiences, but in a new way, a way that wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't shared our creativity first. So
Mm.
those are some things that really are important to me. Also, my good friend Angela, who did move out of the state, is an art therapist. She is doing a wonderful event that I want to promote. She is doing a workshops called Turning the Page on Helene, because it is
Mm.
the anniversary of Hurricane Helene, and I'm going up there to see it next weekend.
Mm.
She'll be in Asheville with a group up there, and I believe the following weekend on the 21st in Black Mountain, if you're in the area. Just sharing the power of art therapy with those around and in remembrance of that event. So that's amazing. I also will be sharing on my page an event advocating for art therapy in collaboration with the Charlotte Observer that I'm really excited about. And I'm sure more events to come as well. So my website is a great place to reach out. You can connect with me on there. It's designalifeyoulove.org, because that's what it's about. That's with
Mm.
my business. That's what it is about for me, just designing this life that I love so I can help others align with their purpose, just as I have by doing this. And I think that's it. Again, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, you've been an amazing, amazing guest, and never would have guessed this was your first time. So
Yes.
there you go. I feel like I have a lot of first timers, so you did amazing. And it's again, thank you for really helping people see potential. I think that even the tearing the pieces, I didn't get to say this earlier, but thinking about that, when we're broken and we're tearing those pieces apart, and I think I heard you almost saying it. It's like we're creating something new out of
Yes.
that brokenness. And I thought, wow, that is so empowering for those students to see that you can break apart a little bit And guess what? You create something really beautiful over here because you've come through it. So, oh, so moving, so heart touching. And I just want to thank everybody for being on here that's on here. We'll make sure to go in and get your links in there, but also comment any questions